All right, before I start my how-to speech, I'm going to scan my audience. There they are. Okay. One of the things I love about joke telling is that jokes can be funny even when they're not funny. So today I'm going to give you some tips on how to tell jokes. I learned the art of joke telling from my father, and I've spent years trying to improve it. And there are many benefits to joke telling because it generates laughter. And according to the Mayo Clinic website, laughter has a lot of health benefits. Laughter can actually reduce stress, it improves our breathing, it can actually make your immune system stronger, and it can even reduce pain. So today I'm going to cover some well-known joke formats, some common topics in jokes, and lastly, some delivery tips for joke telling. We'll begin by looking at some of the most popular joke formats, and there are really quite a few that you can pick from. There are classic ones like knock-knock jokes. For example, knock-knock.
Who's there?
Doris.
Doris who?
Door is locked, that's why I'm knocking. Then there's light bulb jokes. For example, how many University of Kentucky men's basketball players does it take to screw in a light bulb?
How many?
Just one, but he gets 3 credit hours for doing it. Then there's a guy walks into a bar joke. For example, a guy walks into a bar, has a giant frog on his head, and the bartender looks at him and he goes, "Where did you get that thing?" And the frog says, "I don't know, it started as a bump on my butt and then it grew into this guy." Then there's language-based jokes, including jokes that are based on wordplay. For example, did you hear about the kid who swallowed the dollar? Well, the doctor says there's no change yet. Then there's double meaning jokes. How do you fix a broken pumpkin? With a pumpkin patch. And then, of course, there's puns. Did you hear about the cheese store that blew up? There was nothing left but debris. Then there's more offbeat jokes, including absurd jokes. For example, a couple weeks ago, my vacuum cleaner broke, and so I went to the store. The salesman brings out a vacuum cleaner, and he says, "This is the greatest vacuum cleaner. It will cut your work in half." And I said, "That's wonderful. I'll take 2 of them." And then there's what's sometimes called groaners or also dad jokes. For example, what's brown and sticky? A stick. And then there's one-liners. You know, I don't know the meaning of the word Armageddon, but it's not the end of the world. Then there's jokes that can have a multiple punchline. For example, what's black and white and red all over? A newspaper. What's black and white and red all over? A penguin in a blender. Next, we'll take a look at some of the most common topics in jokes. The topic that you select for a joke really does play a big role in whether or not that joke's going to be successful. One of the most common topics is insults. This includes insults of others. For example, the other day, my brother asked me for some dating advice. So I said, "You know, I've heard that opposites attract, so you should probably find someone who's smart and good looking." And then there's self-deprecating humor. So a few weeks ago, I had this really bad headache, and I went to the doctor, and the doctor examined me, and she says, "Sam, you have a sinus infection." I said, "Doc, that's fine, but I think I'd like a second opinion." And she goes, "Okay, you're ugly too." There's intellectual jokes. There's jokes based on literature, history, science. Here's an example of a science joke. 2 atoms are walking down the street, and one says, "I lost an electron." And the other one says, "Are you sure?" And he goes, "Yeah, I'm positive." A lot of jokes have to do with categories of people. Of course, you have to be careful not to overgeneralize. You don't want to offend anybody. But some examples would be jokes about musicians, doctors, lawyers. For example, how do you know when a lawyer is lying to you? His lips are moving. And of course, there's lots of jokes about men and women. For example, how do you get a man to stop biting his nails? You make him wear shoes. Last, we'll take a look at some joke delivery techniques. Delivering a joke properly is very important. First of all, you really need to know your jokes well. If you have to go back, and say, "Oh, I've forgotten," and that really ruins the flow and is going to ruin the joke. In terms of eye contact, if you're giving the joke to one person, look at that one person, but not so much that you make them uncomfortable. If you're giving the joke to more than one person, then spread your eye contact around them. Then use your vocal inflection. One example of that would be if your joke involves a question, you can have a slight increase in your pitch with that question. For example, the other night I was laying in bed, I was looking up at the stars, and I asked myself, what the heck happened to my roof? And then sometimes in terms of your voice, you may actually have multiple characters in your joke and you might do multiple voices. For example, this guy goes ice fishing. And so he sets up his little ice fishing hut about 20 feet away from another guy who's been ice fishing. And he's there for like an hour and a half, has not caught a single fish. But he can see that the guy in the other booth has been catching fish after fish. He finally says, I gotta know this guy's secret. So he goes over to the other guy's little fishing booth and he says, man, I've been here for an hour and a half, I haven't caught a single fish. You've got like 50 fish. What is your secret? And the guy goes, I got a hair crawl. I said, what? I got a hair crawl. I'm sorry, I can't understand you. And the guy goes, boom. You gotta keep your worms warm. All right, let's review. I've told you some tips about telling jokes. I've covered the formats of jokes. I told you some popular joke topics, and I've given you some tips about your joke delivery. So I'll close with this. How does a college professor know when one of his jokes works? His students wake up. All right. And once again, here is my audience. Thank you, audience.